Welcome back, everyone, to the third deep dive in our Arthashastra series.
Great to be continuing the exploration.
Absolutely. So, today, we're zeroing in, focusing squarely on, well, the central figure in this whole ancient manual of statecraft, the king.
Right. Or as the text often puts it, the king as the actual embodiment of the state itself. You really can't grasp the Arthashastra without understanding the king's position.
Exactly. Everything sort of flows from there, doesn't it?
It really does. It's paramount.
And we've got quite a stack of material today, really drilling down into the personal side of things. You know, kingship, as the Arthashastra lays it out. We're going to unpack chapters looking at, well, how a king is made, that crucial need for self-control, the incredibly detailed daily routines.
Surprisingly detailed, yeah.
The constant vigilance needed for security, those ever-present threats of revolt and treachery, and then finally the really complex issue of succession.
It's basically the owner's manual for being an ancient Indian king, right down to the nitty-gritty.
Kind of. And our mission, as always, is to pull out the most insightful bits from these, well, ancient teachings and see what still clicks, you know, maybe surprisingly, with modern leadership and governance.
Peering into this 2,000-year-old guide and finding principles that maybe still echo today.
Yeah, finding those echoes. Okay, so let's dive right in. The making of a king. The Arthashastra is really emphatic about the king's self-discipline. It sees it as absolutely foundational.
It really is.
Sure.
It's presented as the bedrock for the rule of law. And that rule of law, well, that's what guarantees the security and the welfare of the people.
Makes sense.
And what's really interesting here, something for listeners to think about, is the distinction it makes between like inborn discipline and acquired discipline.
Oh, right?
Yeah, it suggests you need some kind of innate capacity, some raw material to really benefit from all the training. It's not just about learning the skills.
So nature and nurture, essentially. You can't just train anyone.
Pretty much, yeah. There needs to be that underlying potential for self-control.
And the training itself sounds incredibly intense. Starts super early, doesn't it? Alphabet, arithmetic, almost from toddlerhood.
Yes, and it builds systematically, from
Yeah.
basics to philosophy and the Vedas for ethics and knowledge, then economics, but taught by like actual government department heads. Very practical.
Not just textbook stuff.
Exactly. And finally, the science of government itself, learned from both theorists and practicing politicians. It's that mix of theory and real-world application.
A really well-rounded education. And that bit about being a celibate student until 16, that's quite something. Really highlights the focus on development first.
It does. It suggests this period of intense self-mastery and knowledge gathering before, marriage and other responsibilities kick in.
And the learning doesn't stop there, right? Even as an adult king, there's this emphasis on sticking close to learned elders.
Definitely. Lifelong learning, basically. Valuing wisdom and experience throughout your rule. It's not unlike modern leaders seeking mentors or advisors, really.
You keep learning from those who've been there. Makes total sense. And the daily routine described, wow, it's structured down to the hour.
It is. Martial arts in the morning, elephants, horses, chariots, infantry, the works. Then listening to itihasas, these historical narratives, in the afternoon.
Learning from the past, yeah. Examples of good and bad statecraft.
Exactly. And then evenings and nights are for study, reviewing lessons. It's relentless self-improvement.
It aims to cultivate this trained intellect, leading to effective application. They call it yoga and self-possession, staying cool under pressure.
That's the goal. A holistic approach. Not just smart, not just strong, but disciplined and integrated.
Sounds absolutely exhausting, but self-discipline isn't just the training schedule. It's also about fighting off those 6 enemies, right?
Ah, yes, the infamous 6: lust, anger, greed, conceit, arrogance, and foolhardiness.
And the text uses examples, doesn't it? Like cautionary tales.
It does. Vivid ones.
Yeah.
Kings who basically self-destructed by giving in to these vices, Tadakia's lust, Janamajaya's anger, they serve as powerful warnings. Like, look what happens if you lose control.
I feel like these guys. You can almost see parallels with modern leadership scandals, actually. Often boils down to one of these.
Sadly, yes. And this leads to the ideal they present, the Rajarishi, the king who's wise, almost like a sage.
A sage king. What's the core idea there?
It's that blend, kingly power with saintly wisdom. So this ideal ruler has that self-control we talked about, keeps cultivating their intellect, uses spies, effectively getting good intel is vital.
Right.
Actively promotes the people's welfare. It's not about personal glory. Upholds dharma, righteousness through authority and example. Keeps learning and, crucially, earns the people's affection.
And it gets specific, too. avoid another's wife or property, practice nonviolence when possible, avoid dodgy company.
All part of the package. Kautilya makes this really pragmatic point about Artha sound economics. He sees it as the foundation. Dharma and kama, righteousness and pleasure, they depend on a solid economic base.
That's quite a grounded perspective. You can't have a virtuous or happy society if the economy's collapsing.
Exactly. Prosperity enables everything else. It's a key takeaway, really.
Okay, so we have this picture. A rigorously trained, self-disciplined, constantly learning king aiming for this Rajarishi ideal. How does that translate day to day? The Arthashastra gets surprisingly specific about daily duties.
It really does. It lays out this schedule, dividing day and night into 8 periods, each about 1.5 hours long.
Wow.
Now, they do say it's a suggestion, adaptable based on capacity, but it shows the level's commitment expected. A life organized around state duties. Makes you think about time management for leaders today, huh?
For sure. No lounging around. Day starts with rituals, then straight to court to hear petitioners. And accessibility is stressed.
Hugely stressed. Being inaccessible is seen as a major flaw. Leads to bad decisions, public unhappiness. The king needs to be available to hear people out.
Like good customer service, almost. Stay connected.
Yeah, that's a decent analogy. And there's even an order for who gets seen first in court.
Right, I saw that. Gods, hermits, Brahmins, then cows. Sacred places, minors, the aged, sick, helpless, women. It reflects a society, but also prioritizes vulnerability.
It does. But there's that crucial exception. Urgent matters jump the queue. Always.
Gotta deal with emergencies first. Prevents things snowballing.
Exactly. Efficient governance. And there's special respect shown when dealing with Vedic scholars and ascetics, hearings in proper settings with other respected figures present.
Highlighting the value of wisdom, spiritual authority, maybe managing public perception too.
Probably a bit of both. Shows respect for moral capital, legitimizes decisions, and it connects the king's personal piety with his public duty. Governance as a sacred task.
But maybe the most fundamental principle here is that the king's happiness is tied directly to his subjects' happiness.
That's absolutely central. His welfare is their welfare. He shouldn't just do what pleases him. He must prioritize what benefits them. It's about service, the common good.
Very much like modern servant leadership ideas.
You could definitely argue that. And finally, on the daily grind, constant activity and economic management is pushed as essential for wealth and prosperity. Back to Artha again.
Right, that foundation. So a busy, accessible king focused on his people's welfare. Got it. Now let's shift focus inwards to security. The Arthashastra seems almost paranoid about protecting the king. A real fortress mentality.
Oh, absolutely. The detailed plans for the royal residence, ramparts, moats, guarded gates, secret passages, emergency exits, even inside his chambers. It screams constant threat.
Protection against fire, snakes, poisons. They thought of everything.
It's like a blueprint for a royal safe room.
Yeah.
And the control over movement inside the palace complex is intense. Everyone stays in their zone, no unauthorized outside contact.
Deep concern about threats from within the walls, not just outside.
Which makes sense, given the power involved. And everything coming in or going out, examined and sealed. Like modern cybersecurity, almost protecting the core asset.
And the king's personal security, layers upon layers, female archers guarding the bedroom.
Yeah, then eunuchs, dwarfs, hunchbacks, ministers, kinsmen, lancers. A human shield, basically.
And loyalty is key. These attendants need a long track record, generations of service.
Proven loyalty. No foreigners, nobody with a grudge allowed near.
Trust is vital, but it's earned, proven trust. The level of suspicion is, well, probably necessary.
And the food and drink precautions are just as extreme. Supervised cooking, only fresh food after rituals, and everything tasted first.
By trusted people. They even list signs of poison. It's like an assassination detection manual.
Chilling, but reflects the real dangers. And it extends to barbers, valets, female servants, cleanliness, sealed tools, testing items first.
Even entertainers and their gear face restrictions inside the palace. Total control over anything potentially harmful.
And security follows them outside the palace too, right? Travel protocols, escorts, definitely. Precautions on boats, clearing areas before swimming or hunting. Any potentially vulnerable situation is managed.
Even receiving ascetics or foreign envoys has specific security steps.
Yes, ascetics are received with armed guards present. Envoys only with ministers there. Constant awareness of threats from anywhere.
But maybe the most disturbing threat is the one from inside the family. Queens, princes. The text is blunt about kings murdered by relatives.
Yeah, those examples are stark. Arthashastra killed by his brother in the queen's rooms. Karusha killed by his son hiding in his mother's bed. It shows betrayal can come from the closest circles. Poisoned food, ornaments, hidden weapons, very personal threats.
Which leads to super strict rules for the queen's interactions, limiting contact, and the discussion on how to handle princes. That gets really complex, lots of different flows.
Yeah, whole spectrum. One view, eliminate all princes at birth, like crabs eating their parents. Another, just confine them. Others suggest sending them to frontier forts or to another king's fort, or putting them with their mother's family, or even letting them indulge in pleasures to kind of neutralize them.
A real range of rather harsh options, but Kautilya himself disagreed with the immediate suspicion, didn't he?
He did, called it a living death. He pushed for proper upbringing and training, like we discussed earlier, warned against putting wicked ideas into innocent minds too early.
His approach seems more strategic, preventative.
I think so. Use friendly agents to subtly guide princes away from bad stuff and disloyalty. Shape character, don't just react with violence. It raises that tricky question, doesn't it? How do you balance security with family, with nurturing future leaders?
A timeless dilemma. Okay, moving from internal threats to the bigger picture, revolts, rebellions, conspiracies, treason. The Arthashastra sees these as constants.
Absolutely. Not if, but when. And popular discontent is seen as a major cause: poverty, greed, bad policies, fueling disaffection. It even lists 16 specific policies that really tick people off.
That's insightful, knowing what not to do. And internal rebellions led by the crown prince, chief priest, defense chief, a minister, are seen as way more dangerous than external ones.
Makes sense. They have insider access, resources, influence. Betrayal from the inside hurts most, and controlling the treasury and army is repeatedly stressed as vital.
So how do you stop these threats before they start? Using spies is key, right? Identifying who's happy, who's not.
Crucial intelligence gathering, yeah. Then you reward the happy ones, reinforce loyalty. For the unhappy, try conciliation, appeasement.
But if that doesn't work?
Well, there's a more cynical tactic.
Yeah.
Give the discontented unpopular jobs where they'll crash and burn, then deal with them. And definitely stop the unhappy folks from teaming up.
A mix of soft power and pretty ruthless tactics, preempting opposition. And if rebellion does break out?
The advice varies. A rebellious crown prince might face death, especially if there's a good spare heir. A chief priest might get exiled or jailed. Depends on their status and the threat level.
And revolts by close relatives. Suppress energetically, but maybe also negotiate treaties or even use third parties against them. Pragmatic.
Whatever works best, essentially. For ministers or regional chiefs, conciliation is often the first step. Try dialogue and incentives before things escalate.
Because alienating powerful figures is risky in itself.
Exactly, and the text even analyzes revolt types, internal origin versus external help. Internal ones are generally seen as more serious. And the leader's character matters handle an upright rebel with grievances differently than a self-serving villain.
That's quite sophisticated. Treat the upright ones, outmaneuver the villains, tailored strategies.
Very much so. And then there's treachery, internal or enemy-instigated. Again, conciliation, gifts, sowing dissension are preferred over force for populations. Secret punishment just for ringleaders.
Avoid widespread crackdowns that could backfire.
Right. Win hearts and minds, or at least divide and conquer. Leverage loyal people to counter the traitors. And for powerful, treacherous officials, covert methods come to play. Using their own relatives, traps, playing them off against each other.
A shadowy world of intrigue.
It highlights the darker side of power maintenance. Trust is fragile, and sometimes clandestine tactics are deemed necessary to protect the state. The ethics aren't really debated, but the methods are laid out.
Okay, after navigating all that treachery, let's talk succession. Clearly vital for stability.
Absolutely critical. A smooth handover prevents chaos. And while the eldest son is the default, he can be bypassed if unfit. Capable lineage is the goal.
And they categorize sons: wise, lazy, or wicked. The wicked-only son is a big problem.
Yeah, in that case, try to get a grandson, maybe through him or even daughters. The rule is generally eldest first, unless he's a danger. A wicked-only son definitely shouldn't inherit.
Provisions for heirs if the king is old or sick, too. Removing a bad heir is seen as good for the kingdom. And collective rule by the family is mentioned as a possibility.
That focus on good governance over strict birth order is key. And the contingency planning shows how vital continuity was. Collective rule is interesting too, maybe aware of the risks of one-man rule.
And how to handle disgruntled sons who might mess up the plan.
Various strategies. Imprison a beloved but problematic only son. Send multiple sons off to govern frontier regions, get them out of the way, give them experience, or even promote a capable but unfairly treated son to chief of defense or heir apparent to buy his loyalty.
Pragmatic ways to manage threats. What if a son feels genuinely wronged? What might he do?
The text considers that too. He might stay obedient, maybe out of fear, or seek refuge with a friendly neighboring king, or, more drastically, turn to crime to fund himself, or actively try to incite rebellion.
A realistic take on potential reactions to perceived injustice.
Definitely. And the king's countermoves. Persuasion first, maybe, then capture, possibly through sneaky means, and then, well, pacify and confine an only son. But if there are multiple threatening sons, elimination is on the table.
Stark choices. Reflects the high stakes.
It really does. The difference between one son and multiple likely reflects that cold risk calculation, losing the whole line versus removing one threat.
And when the king does die, there are detailed steps for the transition, right?
Extremely detailed. Keep the illness secret, manage public perception, secure the treasury and army immediately, neutralize threats from neighbors or internal rivals. A trusted chief counselor is essential to manage all this.
Minimize vulnerability, ensure continuity. Makes sense. What about a regency? If there's no heir or he's too young?
That's covered too. Some argue the counselor should just take over. But Kautilya disagreed. He favored installing another worthy royal prince, or even a princess or a pregnant queen, with the counselor acting as regent and guardian.
So keep it in the royal family, even if indirect. Maintain legitimacy.
Exactly. The counselor is a steward, not a replacement, preserves the established order, and the regent has huge responsibilities. Run the kingdom, educate the young ruler, ensure a smooth handover eventually.
A massive balancing act. Needs wisdom, integrity, selflessness.
For sure. Serve the kingdom, then step aside.
Okay, finally. The text looks at some abnormal kingship scenarios through comparisons, like diarchy, joint rule.
Yeah, generally seen as worse than a single foreign king because of potential rivalry. But Kautilya argues maybe rule by a father-son team or two brothers who care about the kingdom could be better than an exploitative foreigner.
Interesting trade-offs. Internal strife versus external exploitation.
It encourages nuanced thinking. Then there's the uneducated king versus the deviant one.
Who's worse?
Well, maybe you can guide an educated king. Kautilya thinks the deliberately deviant one is worse because he'll consistently act unjustly. Character and ethics trump lack of knowledge, in a way.
Then a sick king versus a new, maybe usurping king.
A sick but legitimate king might still rule with help. A new usurper, even if strong, might lack popular support and face instability. Legitimacy matters.
And lastly, a weak but noble-born king versus a strong but low-born one.
Kautilya leans towards the highborn. Argues people will obey him more naturally, resist a low-born leader's intrigues, regardless of strength. Reflects the social hierarchy of the time, right? Lineage, implied capacity.
Perceived legitimacy being as important as actual power.
Seems to be the argument, yeah. One article called it the invisible empire, which sounds pretty fitting.
It does, and his core belief seems crystal clear, really. Hidden knowledge, knowledge others don't have. It wasn't just an edge.
It was survival.
Fundamentally, yeah. Knowing what others didn't, that was the ultimate power for Kautilya.
Okay, so how sophisticated was this system, really, for back then?
That's what the sources really hammer home, the sheer sophistication. We're talking about a system that wasn't just, big, but meticulously documented.
Documented.
And employing this huge range of spies. Think undercover agents disguised as just everyday people.
Like who?
Merchants, wandering monks, ascetics. Even, believe it or not, people pretending to be lunatics.
Seriously, fake lunatics.
Apparently so. Then you had double agents, working to get inside enemy circles. And provocateurs.
Provocateur, what was their job?
Stirring things up, identifying internal threats that way. It's fascinating.
It sounds like he had this deep, almost intuitive grasp of human motivation and how society actually works.
Well, these weren't just random recruits, right? They were strategically placed informants, embedded deep.
Everywhere.
Villages, markets, even the royal court's inner circles. The logic, according to one source, was that the really dangerous threats, they often come from within.
Makes sense. So he needed to. What was that phrase?
See without being seen, and hear what's never spoken aloud. That's how another article put it.
That really gives you a sense of the challenge, doesn't it? The vulnerability he felt.
Absolutely. It's about preemption. Having eyes and ears everywhere meant spotting threats before they could actually blow up.
So internal stability was paramount.
far more damaging than an external enemy, potentially. That, quote, a weak king is more dangerous than a foreign enemy really sums it up.
Yeah. So this network, it wasn't just fact-gathering. It was about understanding the kingdom's true state, its weaknesses.
Exactly. A comprehensive picture.
And it wasn't just about enemies outside or potential rebels inside. He was watching his own people, too.
Oh, definitely. The sources stress the focus on counterintelligence. He knew having spies wasn't enough. You had to watch your own key players.
Like ministers, commanders, even the guards?
Nobody was off limits. Ministers, commanders, palace guards, yep. Scrutiny for everyone, important.
How did he actually do that? Test loyalty.
Some really interesting methods detailed in the sources. Fabricated scenarios, like little plays almost, setting traps to gauge reactions.
Plotting things.
Subtle traps, yeah.
Yeah.
Testing allegiance. And if you failed, the consequences were swift, decisive.
Ouch. So it wasn't just punishment for punishment's sake.
The principle seems to be maintaining state security, integrity, whatever it took.
Right. And beyond just the mechanics, the spying. He was into psychological warfare, too. Perception management.
Big time. The sources describe his strategic use of, well, fear, illusion, morale as tools. Tools for governing and for war.
How so? Give me an example.
Spreading calculated misinformation to demoralize enemies or confuse their spies. Launching disinformation campaigns, false reports of victories, or maybe defeats.
It's almost creepy how relevant that still feels today.
It really is. What's striking is how early he saw the battlefield as psychological, not just physical. Manipulating perception meant winning with less bloodshed, more strategy.
That's a sophisticated viewpoint for the time.
Very. Understanding human psychology in conflict and power.
And that idea of strategic humility. Appearing weak when you're strong, strong when you're weak.
Mm-hmm. One article points out he was doing this before Sun Tzu was widely known in India.
That's fascinating. What does that tell us about his strategic mind?
Well, it suggests deception wasn't just a one-off trick for him. It was a long-term strategic tool.
How so?
Cultivating a false image could, lull enemies into complacency, create surprise opportunities, gain an advantage down the line. It's very calculated statecraft.
Deeply calculated. Okay, so shifting to internal threats again.
Yeah.
Corruption, dissent.
Yeah.
How did he tackle those?
The sources emphasize he focused on understanding why people turn disloyal or corrupt. Human motivation again, not just cracking down hard.
So those tests for ministers, planted bribes, staged scandals, that was part of it.
Exactly, prime examples. And his advice to deliberately divide power. Rotate key officials.
Yeah, to stop anyone getting too powerful.
Precisely. Prevent monopolies of authority. That principle still echoes today, right? In modern organizations, bureaucracies.
Absolutely. Checks and balances. Preventing unchecked power. Seems like a lesson we're still learning.
You could say that. He understood the corrupting influence, distribution of responsibility, regular turnover. It minimizes risk.
Okay, but this level of surveillance, it sounds a bit, uncomfortable today. Do you see it differently?
The sources suggest he viewed it as a kind of moral necessity for maintaining social order, what he called dharma.
So not paranoia, but pragmatism.
Yeah, in what he likely saw as a very unstable world. It was about stability.
How did that look in practice?
Well, recommendations for rulers to actually go out in disguise, mingle with people, hear their grievances firsthand.
Really? The king himself?
That's what's suggested. And placing secret observers within different groups, even religious orders.
Wow. So less like a modern surveillance state, more like comprehensive information gathering from all angles.
That seems to be the key insight, top-down and bottom-up understanding of the kingdom's real situation.
Okay. But with all this control, what about punishment? Was it just harsh?
Actually, no. Kautilya recognized the need for balance. The sources highlight his advocacy for proportional punishment.
Proportional.
Yeah, and remarkably, for rehabilitation, especially for first-time offenders.
Rehabilitation. Back then.
Surprising, isn't it? He seemed to understand that ruling purely through fear and brutality just wasn't sustainable long-term.
So there's that quote.
Punishment must be just enough to deter, not destroy. That's the guiding principle mentioned.
What does that tell us about his long-term vision?
Well, it suggests he knew stability depends on a sense of justice, fairness. Harshness breeds resentment, rebellion. But offering a chance for redemption, that can build loyalty, cohesion.
It's surprisingly nuanced. More than just repression.
Definitely. A sophisticated view of governance.
Okay, so when it came to actual war, his approach was
intelligence over muscle. That's the clear message from the sources. He believed conflicts were won primarily in the mind. Strategy, deception, information, not just brute force.
And there's another quote there.
Yes. A king shall not undertake any affair relying solely on his own intellect. He shall consult with others and verify through spies.
What's the takeaway there for leaders today, in any field?
The absolute importance of informed decisions. Kautilya knew even the strongest leader is weak without good, verified information.
So seek diverse views, gather intel, don't just trust your gut.
Exactly. That principle goes way beyond the battlefield.
Right. The focus on infiltration, deception, surveillance, it's intense. And the spy hierarchy, the nation within a nation.
Yeah, the sources give fascinating details. Specific types of agents. Gudapurusha, the deep cover ones. Vyayamika, the roving spies. Udastita, stationary observers. Even Tirtha spies in religious disguises.
What was the point of having all these different types?
Adaptability, mostly. And reach. Different skills, different spheres of operation meant a comprehensive flow of info from everywhere. Specialization allowed for targeted gathering, better infiltration.
Breadth and depth.
That's the idea.
And the people they recruited. Sannyasis, ascetics, merchants, even marginalized groups.
And they weren't just listening. Sources suggest they were active, manipulating rivals, subtly starting uprisings, shaping public opinion.
It's like 4th century BC psyop.
On a grand, intricate scale, yeah. It shows he understood influence comes in many forms, through many channels. Leveraging diverse people allowed for subtle pressure. Manipulation that force alone couldn't achieve.
A real grasp of social dynamics and power.
Seems so.
Okay, so the term surveillance state feels negative now. But for Kautilya, was it more strategic? Preventative?
The sources lean that way. Extensive, yes, but aimed at prevention, not just paranoia. Targeting officials, generals, potential rivals.
To spot trouble early. Corruption, inefficiency, betrayal.
Exactly, a proactive approach. Identify and mitigate threats before they escalate. That was a cornerstone of his strategy for stability.
And disguise was a key tool. The training sounds intense, mimicry, languages, acting, local customs.
Essential to blend in anywhere. Posing as monks, performers, traders, lovers, refugees. Embedding spies at every single level.
What does that tell us about spying back then?
Well, without modern tech, human adaptability was everything. Convincingly becoming someone else was crucial for access. It highlights the importance of reading people, understanding social cues.
It wasn't just watching, right? Disruption was part of the game.
Oh yeah, active sabotage, spreading rumors, staging fake miracles to sway opinion, inciting rebellion in enemy lands, bribery, blackmail.
To create chaos among rivals.
So discord, internal conflict, yeah. Not always ethical by our standards, maybe, but strategically effective from his viewpoint.
So his ethics were pragmatic, about the state's survival.
Seems that way. The security and well-being of the state was the ultimate goal. The ends could justify the means, in some cases.
That quote about morality.
What brings about the greatest good for the kingdom is what is moral. That sums up his results-oriented, pragmatic, ethical framework. Protecting the people, sovereignty. That was the justification.
Even the counterintelligence stuff sounds so modern. Double agents, planting fake info, detecting enemy spies by watching their lifestyle.
Cold War tactics, almost. And even humane interrogation trying to turn captured spies using incentives before force. It's all surprisingly detailed in the Arthashastra. His understanding of the complexity seems really advanced. The psychology of deception, verifying info, turning enemy assets, he got it.
Okay, so let's switch gears. Economics. The sources paint the king as, the chief economic strategist.
Pretty much. A very active interventionist role. Not just a figurehead. He was responsible for shaping the whole economic landscape.
Like what specifically?
Generating revenue, promoting agriculture, trade, industry, but also cracking down on corruption in the system, setting wise tax policies, protecting vital infrastructure.
So the state was deeply involved.
Absolutely. The principle was that the state had to manage the economy for the kingdom's benefit.
And his ideas on taxes, that bee and honey, quote, is famous, right?
The ruler shall collect taxes as the bee collects honey from the flower gently, without harming it.
Exactly.
It captures his core approach.
Which was?
Surprisingly enlightened. Flexible rates, sensitive to economic status.
Yeah.
Lower taxes during hardship, even incentives for entrepreneurs.
Progressive on those.
In a way, yeah. He understood that crushing taxes kill the economy long term. Don't kill the golden goose, right?
What's the lesson there for today?
The need for sustainable, equitable taxation, balancing state needs with the people's ability to produce. It's still the central challenge.
And agriculture, that was fundamental.
The absolute backbone of wealth. High priority on irrigation, land grants, crop rotation, storage, even disaster planning, famine relief.
Supporting farmers directly.
Yeah, loans, tools, ensuring profitability and sustainability. Recognizing food security is national security, basically.
And state-owned enterprises, SOEs. That's not new either.
Not at all. Cotilia had systems for state-run industries in vital sectors. Mines, salt, liquor, textiles, weapons, shipbuilding.
Why? What was the rationale?
Too important to leave to chance or private monopolies, ensuring state control over essentials, and generating revenue for the treasury, an early form of state capitalism.
Interesting. And managing that treasury.
Crucial. Principles like maintaining a surplus for emergencies or investment, holding core assets, gold, gems, grain, diversifying income sources, rigorous auditing.
Sounds like modern finance.
Very similar concepts. Liquidity, asset diversity, financial oversight. The insight is the timeless need for fiscal responsibility.
Okay. What about trade?
Big promoter, even with rivals, if it was advantageous. He knew trade was the kingdom's artery.
How did he support it?
Protecting trade routes, appointing trade commissioners, regulating weights, measures, prices, ensuring fairness, fair import-export duties, supporting merchant guilds.
So open markets, but with rules.
Exactly. Promote trade, but regulate it to prevent exploitation and keep things fair.
And there was a welfare aspect, too.
Surprisingly, yes. Support for vulnerable groups, widows, orphans, the poor, elderly, disabled, even hints of land redistribution sometimes. Encouraging social mobility through education, work.
So not just about raw growth.
No, it suggests a belief that social cohesion, supporting the vulnerable, actually contributes to the kingdom's overall strength, a strong economy with a compassionate core.
It's quite a model. Wealth creation is a science, almost.
Yeah, driven by those four engines: agriculture, trade, taxation, labor industry. The king's job was to invest in infrastructure, support entrepreneurs, protect key industries, building systems, not just short-term schemes.
Like a CEO managing the whole system.
The state as the ultimate CEO, with the treasury as the backbone. Efficient taxes, disciplined spending, zero tolerance for corruption. Investing for the long-term public good. Timeless principles.
And that milk the cow gently idea for taxes.
Right. Flexible rates, tax holidays in bad times. Fostering willing contribution, not revolt. And protecting that wealth was key to secure routes, safe granaries, law and order.
It's a complete picture, even economic intelligence.
Monitoring markets for price swings, manipulation, hoarding, black markets, a proactive approach, understanding data, even back then.
And he believed everyone needed some economic understanding.
Yeah, financial discipline, economic education for all levels. Ignorance of money leads to ruin for individuals and the state. Financial literacy is survival.
So circling back, the state's role was strong, interventionist. The king shall enrich the country.
And strengthen the economy.
Exactly, yeah.
Those parallels to modern state capitalism models like China or Scandinavia are thought-provoking.
And the details on taxes, again, proportional, flexible, strategic incentives. Sounds like modern policy debates.
It really does. Adjustments for hardship, breaks for entrepreneurs, lower rates for underdeveloped areas. Echo current strategies.
Same with trade open but regulated. Promoting international trade, but maybe some protectionism too.
A strategic approach. Caution about unregulated imports. And anti-monopoly laws. Price regulation, early antitrust and consumer protection, you could say.
What about workers?
Significant focus there, too. Fair wages, safe conditions, even arbitration systems for disputes, early labor rights concepts, plus that huge emphasis on agriculture as the lifeline, needing state support.
And banking. Loans.
Regulated. Mention of moneylenders, but prescribed interest rates depending on the loan type. Condemnation of usury. State oversight. Very similar to modern credit regulation.
Infrastructure too. Roads, canals, forts.
A national priority for growth. Boosting trade, transport, security, almost Keynesian government spending stimulating the economy.
And finally, wealth and morality.
Linked. Believed in shared prosperity, discouraged hoarding. Extreme greed undermines everyone. Blending economics with ethics, social responsibility.
And that foundational idea, wealth enables everything else.
Artha, wealth, is the foundation of dharma, duty, and kama, desire. Economic stability is the prerequisite for a flourishing society, in his view.
Wow. Okay, let's shift to the third pillar. Leadership. What's the core message there?
Duty to the state above all else. King's happiness lies in the people's happiness. That's the essence. Servant leadership.
Public welfare over popularity. Respect over being liked.
Exactly. That phrase one source used. Mission before mood, purpose before pride. That nails it.
And knowledge was key for leaders, too.
Indispensable. Mastering philosophy, economics, politics, war strategy. Not just reading, but understanding the forces at play. Leaders as relentless learners.
Makes sense. And information, like for the state, was vital for the leader personally.
Absolutely. Using those intelligence networks to know about threats, allies, corruption. Decisions made in ignorance are made in darkness. Constant listening to data, people, whispers.
What about managing power? The divide and manage stuff.
Pragmatic. Pitting rivals sometimes. Strategic alliances. Diplomacy first, playing the long game. Maybe sounds Machiavellian, but it's about strategy, not just force.
And personal discipline for the leader.
Huge demands. Early rising, study, modest habits, calm under pressure, avoiding indulgence or favoritism. And leaders could be removed for corruption or incompetence. Loyalty had to be earned.
Lead by example.
Or step aside, yeah.
He seemed wary of who got power.
Very. Warned against emotional rulers, ignorant ministers, greedy officials, nepotism. Power belonged to the wise, just, capable, merit-based leadership.
What about ethics for the leader? How did he balance ideals and reality?
Nuanced. Valued dharma duty, righteousness, but recognized the need for deception, diplomacy, even force when the realm's security was threatened. Ethical when possible, ruthless when necessary.
Seek peace, prepare for war.
Yeah.
In life, business, politics.
That kind of pragmatism, yes. It's a tough balance.
So the ideal leader revisited.
Yeah.
Wise, self-controlled, committed to the people's well-being.
That's the core. Servant leadership again. People before power, vision before ego. Still relevant.
And the need for continuous learning. Training.
Absolutely. Rigorous education was expected. Translates today to upskilling, adaptability, growth mindset.
Team building was important too, advisors.
Crucial. Wise counselors, skilled administrators, loyal allies, but also accountability, vigilance, performance checks, delegation with oversight, modern management principles, really.
And making decisions. Strategy over sentiment. Head over heart.
Balancing both, actually. Emotional intelligence and strategic thinking. Making hard calls, calculating risks, focusing long-term, knowing when to pivot, when to hold steady.
What about crises, famines, invasions?
Preparation was key. Having protocols, anticipating problems, acting decisively, calm in the storm, rational, focused on recovery, timeless crisis management skills.
And that seeming paradox, using espionage but demanding integrity and governance.
A nuanced approach. Gather intel strategically, even if it's morally gray sometimes, but govern internally with transparency and integrity. Condemn corruption fiercely. It's complex.
Leadership often is.
And it all comes back to that long-term vision.
Exactly. Building something enduring, investing in people, thinking beyond your own tenure, building systems, prioritizing the future.
Okay, so bringing it all together for you, the learner, listening to this deep dive, what really jumps out, for me, it's that sophistication of the ancient spy networks. Really makes you rethink modern assumptions.
Yeah, that's striking.
And the economic ideas, so surprisingly progressive centuries early, that blows my mind a bit.
For me, it's definitely the timelessness of the leadership principles.
Yeah.
Servant leadership, continuous learning, strategic thinking, that ethics versus pragmatism tension.
Still so relevant.
Incredibly so. These lessons just don't seem to age, regardless of the context.
And that aha moment for me, it's how interconnected it all is in Cortelia's thinking. Intel, economics, leadership, not separate boxes.
No, they're all woven together, essential parts of building and keeping a strong, stable, prosperous state.
It's a whole system. Precisely. And for someone like you, interested in getting knowledge quickly but thoroughly, the Arthashastra is just a masterclass. Strategic thinking across so many critical areas.
Actionable principles, enduring wisdom.
Exactly. Applicable in so many modern situations, way beyond just running a country.
Okay, so as you mull over all this Kautilya wisdom, think about his intense focus on constant vigilance, on strategically using information. In our world today, drowning in digital information, often overwhelming.
Yeah.
How could those core principles apply? How do we navigate this landscape effectively? What kind of personal, invisible empire of knowledge and critical awareness should we be trying to build?
Kautilya thought information was, well, maybe more powerful than an army?
Absolutely. He believed knowing what your opponent was up to, their plans, their weaknesses, that knowledge surpassed sheer numbers or strength.
So it wasn't just brawn, it was brains, strategic thinking.
Precisely. And spies weren't just an add-on for him, they were central.
Yeah.
The texts, they say things like, the king shall employ spies under the guise of ascetics, merchants, everyday people.
Not just soldiers reporting back.
No, no. It was about deeply understanding the enemy's society, their leaders, finding the cracks.
Makes you think immediately about today, doesn't it? Cyber espionage, data leaks.
It's the same core idea, really.
Right.
Getting that critical information edge, different tools, same goal.
And the types of spies he used? Quite something.
Oh, yeah. He had categories. Stationary spies, people embedded in communities like monks, traders, even courtesans. And then mobile spies, travelers, actors, people who could move around and infiltrate.
And he specifically used women, didn't he? For certain tasks.
Yes, significantly. Especially for uncovering plots, influencing powerful figures. It shows a really sophisticated understanding of social dynamics for intelligence.
Quite ahead of its time, maybe.
You could definitely argue that. And it underscores how vital human intelligence, still is. Technology is amazing, but sometimes you just need a person on the ground.
Right. Now, it wasn't just gathering info, was it? He was into manipulating it, too.
Oh, absolutely. Misinformation was a key tool. Spreading false rumors, creating fear, destabilizing enemies from within. Psychological warfare, essentially.
Is there a specific quote on that?
There's one that goes something like, create the illusion of rebellion to flush out traitors. So using disinformation internally as well.
Wow. So the roots of propaganda and info ops go way, way back.
Deep roots. He saw that controlling perceptions, controlling the narrative, could be just as effective as winning a battle. Sometimes more so.
And this vigilance extended inwards too, right? He wasn't just worried about external enemies.
Very much so. Kautilya was deeply concerned about internal threats, conspiracies, dissent within the kingdom.
So counterintelligence was a big deal for him.
Huge. He advocated for planting spies within his own court, monitoring officials, testing loyalty constantly. That fear of the enemy within, it's timeless, isn't it?
Yeah, the insider threat problem. Still highly relevant.
Definitely.
Okay, then there's the aspect that's maybe more controversial, his pragmatism.
You mean his willingness to use pre-ruthless methods?
Exactly, eliminating threats, even if the means weren't exactly, ethical by today's standards. Poison, staged accidents.
Yes. He operated under the principle that the security and stability of the state were paramount. If harsh measures were needed to eliminate a genuine threat, he saw them as justified. It's a tough aspect to grapple with.
It certainly raises ethical questions.
It does. But looking historically, this kind of reason of state justification where the state's needs override conventional morality, well, it hasn't exactly disappeared from international relations.
True. Okay, so wrapping this up. Key takeaways from Kautilya. Massive focus on intelligence, diverse spy networks.
The power of psychological manipulation, both external and internal.
Intense focus on internal security, counterintelligence.
And yeah, that very pragmatic, sometimes ruthless approach to ensuring the state's survival. A whole strategic system from over 2,000 years ago.
And then the echoes today are just undeniable.
They really are. The context changes, the tech changes, but some fundamental principles of power and information seem enduring.
Which leaves us with a thought, maybe. Kautilya was all about getting information for security, using sometimes ethically dubious means. How has that balance between security needs and ethical methods really shifted, or maybe hasn't shifted much at all since his time? So as we wrap up this deep dive on the king and the Arthashastra, wow, it's really striking how much of this resonates, isn't it? Leadership training, self-control, vigilance against threats, succession complexities. These are still huge topics today.
Absolutely. The context is ancient India, but the core challenges of leadership, stability, welfare, they're remarkably persistent. Kautilya offers some enduring wisdom despite the time gap.
And for you, listening, someone trying to understand strategic thought, you can see how this framework, though old, gives timeless insights into leadership dynamics, the challenges of stability.
It really provides a fascinating lens for looking at history, but also at modern politics, even organizations.
Think about those parallels, Kautilya's 6 enemies and the pitfalls for leaders today, or that constant tightrope walk between projecting strength and genuinely fostering loyalty.
Those are fundamental human challenges in wielding power, transcending time and culture. Understanding them is always valuable.
Of course, we've only scratched the surface today. The Arthashastra is huge, multifaceted, espionage, economics, so much more to explore. But we hope this dive into kingship has sparked your curiosity, given you some valuable nuggets.
Hopefully provided a solid foundation and maybe some inspiration to look even deeper.
What stands out to you, the listener? What feels most surprising or relevant from Curtilia's view on kingship? It's definitely just the start of a much bigger conversation.
Indeed. Lots more to uncover in this ancient text.